Welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new here, my name is Mel, and I like do a little bit of everything, but one of those things is combining books and makeup because I like both. So here we are. I talk about books while doing my makeup. And today we are going to talk about, well, I'm going to talk about Rebecca by Daphne du... So I saw the trailer for the movie Rebecca on Netflix a few months ago, and it looked really intriguing. I was like, ooh, ghosts, romance, great. And I saw that it was obviously based on a book, and so I was like, well, of course I have to read the book. Took me forever to get the book. I got it as a Christmas present, so but I was super grateful because I was like, yes, I can read it now. So I read it, and I just finished watching the video, or the movie today. So here we are. So I will do my best to remember to put like spoiler alerts or whatever in here, so that if you don't want to hear any endings or anything like that, then... So Rebecca is basically about this woman. It's first person perspective, so it's like, I went here or whatever, you know. It's about this girl, this young girl who meets this man, and they supposedly fall in love, and they marry very quickly. And she knows he's a widower because his wife died about a year ago, and so about a year later he gets remarried to this young girl. When I say young girl, I should say young woman. I'm sorry. Young woman. And, you know, everything's just fine and dandy. So she goes back and all this weird stuff, well, I shouldn't say weird stuff is happening, but basically she feels all this pressure to live up to his former wife's reputation, or whatever, she's so often compared to Rebecca, and basically the story is just, I mean, there's a lot to it, I'll get into it, but that's the gist of the story for those of you who don't know what Rebecca is about. You follow this young woman who falls in love and just sort of her journey, because it is a mystery. It's like it says on the cover that it's a romantic suspense, but it's yeah, it's like it is suspenseful. But yeah, it's more on the mystery side of things. So I guess I'll just start from the beginning. So we start in Monte Carlo with the young woman, and I'll talk about this later, but she doesn't have a name, okay? Well, she does, but we don't know it. So it starts with her. She is working as a ladies' companion, because that was a thing back then. It's set in like the early 1900s. So she's working as a ladies' companion for this woman named Mrs. Van Hopper. And so they're chilling in Monte Carlo, and then Mrs. Van Hopper, she's like a socialite. Well, I don't know. You'd call her that. She's not young. Anyways, so they're chilling or whatever. Mrs. Van Hopper finds out that Maxime de Winter, I don't like that name, Maxim. It's weird. Anyway, so she finds out that he's going to be at the hotel that they're at. So she sets it up to where basically they can meet, because she likes meeting prominent people. And he is the owner of this place called Manderley, which is supposedly one of the most beautiful places, most beautiful and envious of places to look at and live at in England. So yeah, so she basically just quote unquote befriends him, and he comes off as very okay, so I guess in the movie he's kind of rude, but in the book, like, he's rude. Which I suppose it makes sense for someone whose wife just died, but like, even like in the book, I was like, there's no way he loves her, because he's just rude, and he like treats her like a freaking child, which, I mean, I suppose to him she is, because She's young. We don't know exactly how young, but we know he's old, almost old enough to be her father. So that's great. Which also, you can't see that age difference in the film, so I guess they close that age gap more than it is presented in the book. So there's that. But yeah, he's moody. I didn't like him. Because when I originally picked it up and saw the trailers and everything for the movie, I thought it was going to be kind of like a Jane Eyre type of thing. Where, you know, turns out the guy's keeping his wife locked up somewhere. And his new wife finds out. His new wife's like his, what's the word? Saving grace or whatever. Is that it? I hope I don't mess up my eyebrows. Okay. Mrs. Van Hopper gets sick, and so that kind of frees up the main character's time, because now Mrs. Van Hopper has a nurse to take care of her while she's getting better, so that leaves her lady companion to not do whatever she wants, but, you know, she doesn't have to be at her side 24/7 having lunch with all these bougie people. Okay, so while, now that she's quote-unquote freed up or whatever, she just spends her time outside, chilling, and she runs into Mr. De Winter, and he invites her over to, you know, have lunch with him or whatever, and she's like, what the heck? Because she's just quote-unquote staff, like, they aren't supposed to be, you know, hanging out together. Well, they can, but, like, so they're having lunch and they get to know each other, and she basically tells him like her whole life story, and you know, she feels like she has a real connection because she's never talked that much to anybody before. So that's nice. I'm sorry if I'm so critical about like relationships. It's just it's funny. Okay, so they hang out for like about a week or something like that, and in the movie they sleep together on the beach, which does not happen in the book. Just wanted to say that, okay? In the book, all they did was went on drives, drove through town, talked a ton, and if it was ever implied that they got intimate, then I must have missed that. Either that or it wasn't intended for that to be the case, and they just threw that in there for a dramatic effect, which is most likely because nowadays you can't have a movie with that in there, or without that in there. Anyways, okay, so let me think for a second. I forgot what I was gonna do. But then Mrs. Van Hopper gets better again and everything's great, and she decides to leave and meet her daughter in New York or something like that. And so she's like, hey, we're leaving tomorrow morning. Make it happen. And the main character is of course freaking out. I don't like that. She doesn't. Well, whatever. Okay. So, of course, the main character is freaking out. So, the next morning, right before they leave, she runs to Mr. De Winter's room. And she's like, we're leaving forever. I may never see you again, so I wanted to say bye. So, and this is, I don't know why I didn't expect this, but he is just, he's crazy. He's just, yeah. So, they do a lot of running around. He sucks at communicating. Okay, I'm sorry. So his solution was that they get married. He was like, well, just come to Manderley with me. And she's like, what? And she's like, I can't just do that. I'm like working or whatever. And he's like, just come. And he's like, don't you understand what I'm saying, you little, he says things like little fool or a little idiot or child and stuff like that. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not marrying any man who calls me a little fool. Call me that one more time. One more time. Okay, so, yeah, so he basically, in a very unconventional way, proposes to her, and of course she says yes, because, like, why not? Even though there's a million reasons why not to. And so she says yes, and he goes and tells. So in the book, Mr. De Winter goes and tells Mrs. Van Hopper himself, like they're alone or whatever, so we don't get to see it, or get to see what happens. In the movie, they tell her together, and it's hilarious. You know, and then when Mrs. Van Hopper and the main character talk again, she's like, girl, you really think he's in love with you? Mm-mm. He just doesn't want to be alone. Like, you don't mean anything to him. Basically is what she says. And she's like, you'll regret it because you have no clue what you're doing. You don't even know how to run a house. Just all this stuff. So already the main character is feeling terrible about herself, kind of. But she's also like, well, whatever. We're in love. Because love does that. Supposedly. So all that happens, they go to Manderley together, and she's basically makes a fool of herself in front of all the servants, because they can immediately tell that she wasn't well bred, you know, like born into a wealthy family or whatever, because of how she walks, how she carries herself, the fact that she quote unquote doesn't really have manners, she doesn't know how things work in a household like that. And she meets Mrs. Danvers. Now the woman who played Mrs. Danvers in the movie did an okay job. I think she should have been more austere towards her, especially in the beginning. But in the book, it's like I really like how she painted Mrs. Danvers, or Miss Danvers in the book. She was, it just had the perfect vibes. Like, she was super pale and her skin was paper thin, and like hollow cheekbones and sunken in eyes, but like that were very piercing, that could just like kill you with a look, and very cold and impersonable. So I mean, I was like, kind of like Mrs. Danvers. Well, I do, but I don't, you know? Okay, so yeah, and she's like, immediately the main character can tell that they are not going to get along. So that's fabulous. And yeah, so she meets the staff, gets shown around the house, and the West Wing is a place where she can't go. You know, kind of like in the Beauty and the Beast, you can't go in a certain wing. But it turns out it's because that's where Maxim and Mr. De Winter, and I'll call him Mr. De Winter because I don't like saying his first name, and his former wife, Rebecca, used to live and stuff, and it's close to the sea and all that. So this whole time, she doesn't really know much about Rebecca. All she knows is what people have said about her. And all she's being told is that she's not as great as Rebecca. And all the people who she meets, because she meets his kind of like accountant, estate manager, whatever you want to call it. His name is Frank. I can't remember his last name for the life of me, I'm sorry, but his name is Frank, and him and Mr. De Winter are like best friends basically. So she meets him and his sister Beatrice. Okay, his sister Beatrice is like 10 times better and more enjoyable in the book than she is in the film. Just want to make that clear. She is great. Like, she would be my best friend. I think I love her. She is great, and Beatrice's husband as well. So yeah, she meets them and they all say, you're so different from Rebecca, and they're all like surprised that he picked her, so to speak, because yeah, she is really different. They're like, wow, I didn't think you'd pick someone like this. You know, so they're all just like, wow. But they also notice change in Mr. De Winter because he's like, you know, not on the verge of a breakdown. So yeah. Also in the book, she gets kind of annoying. I don't know. I'm like, girl, just stop. Like, she just complains so much, which I suppose I might do too if I were in her situation. But it's just like frustrating how she just all this self-pity and stuff, and which I guess, I mean, literally everyone is judging her and comparing her to Rebecca, literally everyone. And they go to see her, or Mr. De Winter's grandma, and her grandma was like, who are you? Well, she has, you know, their grandma's like really, really old. Like, I think it said she was suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's or something like that. Yeah, so she's like, where's Rebecca? What did you do with Rebecca? You are his wife, stuff like that. And so that just like makes everything worse. And yeah, and she's had a few run-ins with Mrs. Danvers. So there's that. Hang on. Actually, I'll just call him Max. Instead of Mr. De Winter, I'll call him Max. His full name is Maxim. I freaking hate it because it just doesn't make sense in my mouth. So I'll just call him Max, okay? Because that's shorter than Mr. De Winter. So Max and the main character, his wife, his new second wife, whatever, go on a walk, okay? And their dog Jasper runs away, and she's like, wait, Jasper, come back. And Max freaking yells at her not to chase him because he's going to a specific spot that him and and Rebecca would go to, or whatever, because, you know, the dog would follow her everywhere. She does it anyways, even though Max is telling her not to chase the dog. So she chases him, finds him. He goes to this, like, cottage by the sea that was built for Rebecca that she used to stay at. And there she runs into this guy named Ben, who, I don't know the politically correct way to say this, but he has mental disabilities. And so, yeah, but he's nice. He doesn't hurt her or anything. He says things like, I didn't say nothing. I didn't say nothing about what happened. She's gone now. You're not like her. You're different from her. Just all that kind of stuff. And Ben doesn't live there. He's just kind of there. He hangs around or whatever. Because he's not really a harm to anyone. So anyway, so she runs into him, finds the cottage, knows about it, great. And then Max is all mad at her, and she's like, well, I would have known about it if you would have told me. You suck at communication. Yeah, so that's one reason why I feel bad for her, because everyone, if certain things were communicated to her, then certain things could have just been avoided altogether, okay? Whatever. Anyways, also in the movie, he sleepwalks, which he doesn't do in the book. Just wanted to make that clear. When Rebecca was alive, she would hold these big grand balls, and everyone loved them, okay? Everyone would go to them, everyone would dress up, be like a giant costume party, okay, for like all the rich people. So everyone keeps talking to the main character about it, and they're like, oh, I wish you would bring him back, you really should, da-da-da. And finally she's peer pressured into doing it. And Max is like, yeah, fine, whatever. So that happens. So the day of the ball comes, and so in the film, I guess I understand why they did this, but I didn't like it. So in the film, Mrs. Danvers and the main character work together to make the ball happen and to, you know, plan for it and all that. That wasn't what happened in the book. They don't work together at all. She just leaves it all up to Mrs. Danvers. They do not go through a short-lived false, I guess, friendship like they do in the film. That doesn't happen. She just leaves it all to Mrs. Danvers, so she's the one to plan everything, so she doesn't really, you know, she's not as involved in the planning of it. And so everyone's excited, getting ready And so I guess it's like a kind of costume party. So, but she has no clue what she's gonna wear, of course, because she's never been to one of these things. But she's gonna keep it a secret. She wants to surprise everybody, so no one can know, right? And so Mrs. Danvers feigns, you know, being nice or whatever. She really should have known better, but whatever. And she suggests that the main character dress up as one of the, because in the house there's like all these paintings everywhere, obviously, and many of them are family portraits, and so one of them is of, I think her name's Catherine de Winter. She was one of the I guess best matriarchs of the family, in the family line. And so she suggests that, so Mrs. Danvers suggests that she dress up as Catherine de Winter. I really hope that's her name. And she's like, yeah, okay, cool. So she orders a dress from London. The day arrives and everyone's all excited. And so she gets ready to come down. See, if people had just communicated to her, this wouldn't have happened. So she comes down, and thankfully not everyone there sees her. It's just Max, Beatrice's husband, and Frank, okay? They all see her, right? And she's beautiful, but they all just stand there like their faces go white, and they're just like in shock, like, wow, is she really doing that? And Max yells at her, and she won't tell him why. She's like, why? What did I do? Why isn't anyone talking to me? Tell me what I did wrong. If you told me in the first place, then this wouldn't have happened. Anyways, okay, so but also, if she hadn't kept it a secret, it probably wouldn't have happened either. Whatever. Okay, so yeah, he like yells at her to go back upstairs and to change, and she's like, what did he say? What do you think you're doing? Or something like that. And here's why he's so upset and why everyone else is like all embarrassed and stuff. It's because that was the same thing Rebecca did at her last ball. The night before she died, I think. Yeah, the night before she died. Rebecca dressed up as the same person. So when she came down, it was like she was, I'm sure you can imagine, it was like she was trying to be Rebecca, or like making fun of, or trying to hurt Max, all this stuff. And she didn't nobody tell her. She didn't tell anyone in her costume, but also no one told her. Like, she was literally asking, what did I do wrong? And no one would tell her. So she went upstairs crying. I'd be crying too. And as she's running upstairs back to her room, freaking bawling, she sees Mrs. Danvers. And of course, Mrs. Danvers has that evil smile on her face or whatever. A little smirk, like, so yeah, that sucks. And she's like, I ain't going back down there. Yeah, if I were her, I would have been like, nope, I'm done. This is over. I'm done. I wouldn't have gone back down. So kudos to her, I guess. Because I wouldn't have gone back down. I would have stayed up there the rest of the night, not showing my face. Nope. You want to yell at me like that? Fine, I'll stay up here. So Beatrice goes up to her. She tells her why it upset everyone. Well, why it upset Max, and she feels really bad, of course, but also upset because she didn't know. They actually get into a fight over it, of course, well, no, they don't. Oh, that's different. Yeah, okay. Anyways, so that happened. I think it was actually later that night, like, I don't know, 2 in the morning or something. Max hadn't come to bed, so obviously there's some marital issues, okay? Anyways, so they're doing fireworks are done, all that great stuff. So, it's funny because the next morning, Mrs. Danvers actually tries to, her and, what's her name? She doesn't have a name. The main character confronts Miss Danvers about everything, okay? And they're talking or whatever. Mrs. Danvers dominates the conversation and starts like making the main character feel terrible, like you shouldn't be here, this is her house, you can't live up to, you know, to Rebecca, and Max doesn't love you as much as he does Rebecca, he couldn't love you, stuff like that, right? Making her feel terrible. And so they get to a window in the west, was it the West Wing? I think it was. And Mrs. Danvers tries to convince the main character to commit suicide, and she doesn't, of course, but she, I mean, considers it given everything going on. But it doesn't happen. The ground rumbles, they think it's like an earthquake, but turns out it's like basically like a distress call, because the ship has just crashed, and they need help on the coast, wherever they are. I don't know where exactly they are, but they're at Manderley. Anyways, so the ship crashes, everyone's, you know, goes to see what's going on, and it's like a ship from either from Germany, or I think they're heading to Germany. Anyways, they don't focus much on that. Instead, when they send down a diver to, you know, check and see if there's to check debris, see what happened to the boat, things like that, the diver finds Rebecca's like sailing boat. Okay, and they, like the wreck of it or whatever, and they find a skeleton in the boat. I can't talk, sorry. And so I forgot to say this, I'm sorry, but before, so this whole time the main character never really found out what happened to Rebecca in the beginning, but she eventually does when Frank tells her. Also, they didn't really emphasize her and Frank's friendship in the film as much as it's developed in the book, just so you know. So there's that. Anyways, so yeah, so what was I saying? Oh yeah, the main character eventually figures out that Rebecca drowned that fateful night. And they know that because they knew she took out her boat to go sailing, but she never came back. And 2 months later, after she disappeared that night, a body washed ashore. And Max was, you know, called to come and identify it, and he identified it as Rebecca's body. So with this new ship and this new body, everyone's like, what? Okay, now is the spoiler alert or whatever. Now I'm going to start talking about the end and how things play out and all of that. So if you don't want to hear that, then you should go. So let's get started. Also, I'm kind of nervous because I'm using the Inglot Duraline to do some liner action. Okay. And, you know, I don't really do this a lot. And I've never used it with eyeshadow before, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, it kind of works. Okay, yeah. Okay, what was I saying? Oh yeah, spoiler alert. Okay, so they all go back home, right? And they're like, well, everyone's like, what? And so we get a confession from Max, okay? Finally, he tells his wife what the heck is going on, what the heck is wrong with him, why he's so freaking weird all the time, why he's got issues. So, turns out, the way they did it in the movie is completely different than how it was in the book, just so you know. So, what had happened was Max killed Rebecca. Okay, but let me explain. So, turns out, and they're having this discussion in the library, just him and his new wife, okay? The main character. What happened that night was Rebecca was in the cottage or whatever, and Max, you know, went down there because he was looking for her for some reason or something like that. Okay, so basically, Rebecca's like not as great as everyone thought she was, and that's what Max tells her. He's like, no, I hated her. Like, everyone loved her, but she was cruel. She was conniving, just all these terrible things, okay? And so the discussion that her and Max had that night was that Rebecca basically was like laughing at him, because this whole time, because here's the thing with Rebecca would sleep around, okay? She would have any and every guy, and she was beautiful, okay? She was beautiful, she had brains, but she was bad. And she would sleep around with guys. Every guy loved her. Well, everyone loved her. And she knew how to work people, basically. And so every man was just head over heels for her. She would sleep around with all of them. And Max knew it all. But she told them on their honeymoon, basically who she was, all the things she'd done, all the things she will do. And she's like, you can, divorce me and just, because divorce wasn't really a good thing back then. Not that it is, but divorce was different back then. Or you can, deal with what it is I do and stay with me and keep me underly and all that stuff. So basically, she treated him like crap. So they're in the cottage that night or whatever, talking, and she's just like going in on him. I can't remember what exactly brought it up, but okay. Basically, she's like, how would you feel what would it be like to have a son who you knew wasn't yours? Something like that. And so basically she tells him that she's pregnant, but not with his son, obviously, because they don't sleep together. She sleeps around with everyone else. So there's that. And she just keeps laughing at him and laughing at him. I heard a quote once, I can't remember who said it, but women are afraid men will kill them. Men are afraid that women will laugh at them. So that's what happened. She laughed at him. And he saw this as an opportunity to get out of basically the trap that she had put him in, this marriage trap that she put him in, and he shot her. He killed her, then put her in the boat, took it out, put sticks through the bottom of it, and let her drown, basically. Well, he shot her through the heart, so she was already dead. But he made it look like she had like a boating accident or whatever. So tells his new wife this. They're like, okay, it'll be okay, we'll figure it out, because everyone's confused. Even the authorities are confused. They're like, what? Let me take this off. So court day arrives, right? Where it's kind of like not I don't want to call it a trial, but basically it's like an inquiry. It's like they're just asking Max all these questions, trying to figure out what the heck is going on, why, maybe you just like misidentified the previous body, which they did say, or he did use as an excuse, I guess. But they eventually end up ruling it as a suicide. Now, in the film, this scene is completely different from the book, and it's kind of frustrating. I'm like, this is not what happened. In the film, okay, they had Mrs. Danvers speak and all of this stuff, and which is, like I said, not what happened. Okay, so the verdict is that, in the book, the verdict is that it's a suicide, and they all go home, and they're like, okay, well, whatever. So that's fine. But there's this guy, okay, his name is Favell. Well, that's his last name. I don't know. I don't remember. Jack Favell, I think. And he is Rebecca's cousin. And of course they were sleeping together. because she did what she wanted. But he comes to, after the trial or court hearing or whatever you want to call it, he shows up at Max's place. Max isn't there he shows up at Max's place, oh my gosh. And he pulls out this note. He basically tries to blackmail Max. And he pulls out this note that Rebecca sent him earlier that day, to meet him later that night at the cottage, okay? And in that note, it says, I have something important to tell you, please come, or whatever, right? And he obviously didn't make it that night because he was drunk or whatever, so he decided to go the next day. She obviously wasn't there, yada yada. But he brings that note to Max saying, hey, I got this note that'll prove that it was not a suicide, because why would she write a note to someone telling them, hey, I got something important to tell you, and then just go kill herself. So they're all like afraid or whatever, but also it did not happen the way it did in the film, like in the book. It happened differently. In the book, Max is like, all right, I'm not afraid of you, I'm gonna call the police. So he calls the Colonel Julian or whatever, the guy who's overseeing everything, the investigation or whatever you want to call it. And I have to remember to speak at a consistent volume. I'm sorry. So he calls him over, like it's really important. Also Frank is there. So they all like get together or whatever. And they're all there. And so Fable explains to the Colonel, you know, or the Colonel shows up and Max is like, hey, this guy's trying to blackmail me. And which doesn't work, obviously. The Colonel's like, this isn't really evidence. It just says that she wanted to, it's not strong enough basically to suggest that she did not in fact commit suicide. But they do delve into further investigation because Frank is like, or not Frank, Fable's like, oh, well, I got a witness. So he brings in Ben. You remember Ben? And he was, I guess Rebecca treated him poorly, but he was so afraid to like speak. Remember when he saw the main character earlier in the cottage? He was like, I didn't tell anyone. I mean, obviously he saw something. Ben saw what happened, but he kept saying that he didn't want to be sent to the asylum because I guess Rebecca had threatened to send him to the asylum because Rebecca had seen him, because he used to like watch her in the cottage, and so she caught him once and he told her, if I catch you watching me again, then I'll send you to the asylum. So ever since then, that's kind of been what's going on with him, where he's like, I didn't see anything, you know. Please don't send me to the asylum. And so when, you know, they bring him in, Fable's like, hey, do you remember me? Have you seen me at the cottage? And Ben's like, nope, I ain't seen nobody. And Fable's like, you don't recognize me? You don't know me? And Ben's like, no, I don't know you. And he just keeps denying everything because he doesn't want to be sent to the asylum. And as I'm sure you know, asylums are a terrible place to be. So, yeah. So they get nothing from him, and the Colonel's like, okay, this is ridiculous. But then they bring down Mrs. Danvers and question her. And long story short, basically they figure out that before Rebecca came back, she had an appointment in London, okay, with a doctor. So it's this long thing, but basically they go. So in the film, the main character goes by herself to see the doctor, tries to get there before the Colonel and everyone else does. Also in the movie, the Colonel's a butt. Like, he's terrible. In the book, he's much better. Much more understanding and not as annoying. So, yeah. Anyways, so they get there. They find out why. Because, of course, everyone's thinking, oh, well, everyone who knows is thinking she found out she was pregnant at the doctor's, right? Yeah. So that must be it. So they go. And, in the book, they're like, guess we'll see what happens, because, yeah. Okay, so, long story short, big spoiler here, is that Gosh, what? Okay, so turns out what she found out at the doctor's was not that she was pregnant. In fact, she had cancer. It was some kind of uterine, you know, cancer of the reproductive system, basically. So she wasn't pregnant. So she was playing Max the whole time. Fool. So it's basically like she made Max kill her in a twisted psychological way, you know, which is still messed up. Because it's the kind of cancer where she was so far along that in about like 3 or 4 months, she would have been bedridden. It would have been terrible, and she would have died very, very soon, and it would have been very painful, and she obviously didn't want that. And everyone's shocked. Even Favreau, he's like, dang, this is terrible. Everyone's like, wow, we did not expect this. It's a shock. When you're reading it, it's a shock to you as well. You're like, what? She had cancer? This sounds terrible, but I didn't even know they knew about cancer back then. Anyways, yeah. So, yep, it's basically over then. And the way the book ends, though, we're already at the ending. Oh my gosh. Well, I can talk about that. So at the end, though, the way the book ends is just fabulous. Because they're all going home or whatever, and Max and his wife are driving, the main character. They were originally going to stop at a hotel or something like that, like at an inn, on their way back to home from London, because all this happened in London. And, but he's like, no, I'm just going to drive through the night because I feel like something's wrong. We have to get back to Manderley. Something's wrong, right? And you're like, okay. But when they get to Manderley, also they extend this in the movie, which didn't happen in the book. The way it happened in the book was very sudden, very sharp, and you're like, what? What? I read it twice over. But basically, they get back to Manderley, and the place is on fire. It's burning down. Like, well, it did. Okay, so I have to read it to you. I'm sorry. Because this is how it ended, literally. He drove faster, much faster. We topped the hill before us and saw Lanyon lying in the hollow at our feet. There, to the left of us, we saw the silver streak of the river, widening to the estuary at Carith 6 miles away. The road to Manderley lay ahead. There was no moon. The sky above our heads was inky black, but the sky on the horizon wasn't dark at all. It was shot with crimson like a splash of blood, and the ashes blew towards us with the salt wind from the sea. You're like, what? Like, it's just so, like, but it's so, like, it's sharp and direct, but not, it doesn't actually say Manderley was on fire. It just implies it in a very, like, I don't know. It's just great. I really like that. I like how it ended. So yeah, that's the book for you. I thought it was great. The character development was really good. As far as the other characters go, again, I freaking love Beatrice. She wasn't really that big of a character, and I mean, I guess she's not that big of a character in both the book and the movie, but in the movie we didn't really get to hear as much from her as we did in the book, of course, because you can fit more in a book than you can in a movie. But yeah, as far as the book goes, did I tell you when I rated it? I give it a, what did I give it? What did I say? After I read a book, I rate them on Goodreads, and I think I rated this one 4 out of 5. I use Goodreads to just keep track of what I do and don't read, what I want to read, stuff like that. But yeah, I think I gave it a 4 out of 5, because to me, a 5 book is like I would read it again. So would I read this book again? Probably not, but it was good. It was definitely worth reading. So I do highly recommend that you read it. What the heck? But I just don't think it would be something that I would read again. Like, it's not good enough to read a second or a third time. Like, Is The Monk a 5-star book? Heck yeah. Is The Woman in White a 5-star book? Yes, I could read that any day. Is Melmoth the Wonder a 5-star book? Heck yes, I would read that five times over. Would I read this again? No, but it was good. Okay, hang on, I have to concentrate. Yeah, and as far as the writing goes, I really liked it because it's like that in between 1800s writing, like 1800s, 1700s writing, which is what I prefer, versus like, I mean, it's like versus like contemporary, what we would think of as contemporary, not like modern, like 2000s and up, or even like 70s, 80s and up. It's like that in between. So it doesn't feel too modern, but it also doesn't feel quote unquote too old either. So yeah, it's also, there were, however, times where it just spent too much time talking about surroundings and nature. Like, I'm used to that because you read it in Gothic novels a lot. But this it didn't have, I mean, obviously it's not a Gothic novel, so it didn't have the same quote unquote vibes and stuff, and it wasn't Gothic, like, so it's just like went on unnecessary nature tangents, and even sometimes it wasn't always nature, it was just like her explaining her dreams or like things you don't care about, you know? So I didn't like that. Oh, I need to put highlighter on. I think I spent too much time talking in this video and not as much time doing my makeup. So sorry. I gotta finish this. Okay, I'm not gonna wear lashes right now because I'm just too lazy. Okay, I think that is it for this video. Yep, 4 out of 5, pretty good. I liked it. The film wasn't terrible, even though it did, you know, like, switch some things up. But yeah, I highly recommend you read the book, of course, before you watch the movie. So, but yeah, I think that is it for this video. Let me know if you guys liked it by leaving a thumbs up. And if you want to see more of these videos, of course, just subscribe. And yeah, I think that's it. You guys are great, as always, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.